Hello, and thank you so very much for joining me this evening on my presentation on the pink elephant in the room. African American women who bully other African American women in the workplace, organizations, and other professional settings. My name is Barry Wells, and currently I am a doctoral student in my third semester, and recording this presentation is a requirement for one of the courses that I'm taking. What might be a reason that I'd want to study this phenomena? And quite frankly, it's a personal reason. Despite the fact that I am warm, outgoing, easy to get along with, helpful, I have been the victim of bullying, and actually a few times. And the three times that I was a victim, the perpetrator, the aggressors were women who looked like me in terms of ethnicity. And they were close to me in age. So it wasn't an issue of ageism. And those, out of the three, two of the bullying experiences were particularly devastating. And when I say devastating, I mean devastating. And as a result of having gone through and suffered and endured those situations, I thought it might be helpful if I could provide some insight, some information, some inspiration that will hopefully definitely help victims and maybe even catch the attention of a perpetrator or two and influence her perspective, her position, her response. This presentation is going to be fairly brief, but I promise you that it will be full of details and statistics and stories and illustrations. So if you haven't already done so, you just may want to grab a pen or a pencil and a notepad just so that you can take down a couple of notes. The four areas that we're going to cover tonight are going to be number one, the realities of bullying. I'm going to give you just a few statistics and some early scenarios. We'll then take a look at how to recognize bullying. What does it look like? What does it sound like? From there, we'll take a closer look at some of the reasons for bullying. And then lastly, as it relates to Black women or African American women, I'll have a comment for that. And then I'll close out with a call to action, two things that you can do to help alleviate the situation. So, what are some of the realities of bullying? Well, let's face it, bullying is not new. Bullying for adults is not new. And if you think about it, for those of you who are familiar with the Bible, we have a story of bullying that takes place in Genesis, the first book of the Bible, and also in the Old Testament. Briefly stated, Abraham and Sarah wanted to have a child. They were childless, and God promised to the couple that Sarah would have a baby. And fast forward 25 years later, where Abraham is now 99 and his wife is 89, Sarah had not had a baby. And because God had taken so long to fulfill his promise, Sarah thought, let me help God out. And Sarah came up with the idea for Abraham, her husband, to sleep with her maid Hagar. And then once Hagar got pregnant, that Abraham would then have an heir. And that's exactly what Abraham did. And that's exactly what happened. Well, the story, that scenario, it worked for a little while until Sarah actually did get pregnant and have a baby. And at that point, and several years after that, we hear different instances of how Sarah mistreated Hagar, how, in essence, she told Abraham that the only solution was to not only fire Hagar, turn her away from the community. So that meant that Hagar was now homeless. She was now husbandless, and she was also now without employment. And that, when I recalled that scenario, I thought, wow, we have an illustration of way back when, where there was woman on woman bullying, and that Sarah was in a position of authority, and Hagar, in essence, was her employee. And the way that Sarah responded to her was very harsh. It was ongoing. And again, not letting Hagar off the hook, but this is not Bible study, so I'm going to keep the focus on Sarah. In terms of some statistics, the Workplace Bullying Institute, which was founded in the 1990s by a husband and wife dynamic duo, according to them in their studies, 72% of American workers have either A, observed bullying firsthand, or B, been the victim themselves. Let that seep in. 72%. I'm no math whiz, but that's almost 34 or three quarters of all employees. So almost 3 out of 4 employees have either A, been the victim or the target of a bullying act or acts, or they have observed it. Now, granted, my focus is studying on women, and of that 75% or 72%, I'm not exactly sure how many were women, but surely and clearly we can see that bullying is quite prevalent, and it is certainly a situation that there is no upside for anyone. And to the extent that we can stop it, that's what we need to do. Another statistic is that woman on women bullying is up 50% over the past 10 years, over the past decade. And again, another statistic where no, we're not teasing out Black women or women of color, but the fact that it is up, regardless to what shade you happen to be or not be, that is an alarming prevalence. And what we want to do is take a look at what we can do to help stem the tide. So those are some of the realities of bullying. Next, let's take a look at recognizing bullying. What does it look like? Well, bullying takes on several forms, including gossip, humiliation, intimidation, threatening, harassing. And when you talk about professional settings, and now that we're coming out of COVID and people are back in the workplace, withholding information, blocking access to higher ups in the organization, blocking access to certain committees and projects and assignments. Not that one or two of those things in and of themselves that constitute bullying, but if it does happen and if it's happening over a prolonged period of time, you could probably consider yourself as having being bullied. Another thing or another way that we can recognize bullying is that it can include the way that a person, their tone of voice, some people shout, some people scream, some people yell. I wouldn't want to say that does not ever happen, but it is if it is happening, those are definitely indicators that you are being bullied. And on the receiving end, if you find yourself crying at work or crying over work, losing sleep, gaining weight, losing weight, doing or practicing things to help you feel better, but that are not necessarily good for you. So maybe overeating, maybe smoking more, drinking more, spending more money. And again, not that those things in isolation are an indication of bullying, but if you happen to be confronted with that at work and you notice an uptick in those activities, definitely something for you to take a look at. Quickly, let's take a look at the reasons for bullying. Well, there are a lot, beginning with, some say, the glass ceiling is still in place for women. There are limited women in C-suite positions and leadership positions. And so for the women who are in those positions, they want to protect their position and they see other women as a threat or someone who could potentially replace them. And so instead of partnering and supporting the woman, people they get territorial, or the women in question become territorial, and they want to compete as opposed to collaborate. Another reason for bullying is that the aggressor in some kind of way feels threatened or feels inferior to the skill set, whatever it is that this other woman is bringing to the table. The aggressor sees that as something that perhaps she doesn't have herself, and she's envious of that. She's jealous of that. And instead of maybe partnering with her and learning from her, she then goes on the attack and bullies her in response to those feelings of being threatened or inferior. One researcher who I really enjoy, Dr. Pat Heim, she says in part that one of the reasons for bullying is that as a result of how boys and girls are socialized, that little girls who grow up playing doctor, nurse, house, and then boys grow up playing cops and robbers, us versus them, that as a result of the way that they're socialized, that little girls and boys grow up from the playground to the boardroom, and they bring those socialization skills with them. So while the boys are busy playing cops and robbers, which is another form of competition, or if they're involved in team sports, then those boys are exposed to how to win, how to lose, how to play with people who you don't necessarily like. And girls are being socialized playing nurse and house in terms of being relational, and everybody is even and we all get along. And it's not that either of those things are bad. The challenge becomes girls are only learning the relationship activities and boys are only learning how to compete in conflict. And what would really be helpful for them both is to learn from each other. So the issue is that girls, in playing those games, everybody is even. There's no head nurse or head doctor or head princess. Everybody is even. So as long as you're even and you fit in with the pack, you're all good. But when you attempt to break out of that and let your little light shine, that doesn't go so well. And women in turn feel that they then have to, bring you back down and put you, back in your place in terms of being equal with everyone else. Particularly then Black women. How does that come into the picture? I was particularly interested in that because when I look at, recent social movements of Me Too and Black Lives Matter, I think, yeah, I'm all for that. And how does that then translate at work? How are Black women treating each other at work? Now, it's not saying that just because you are a woman that you can't get upset, that you can't provide corrective feedback, that you should like and want to necessarily have everyone over, on a Saturday afternoon. No, it's not saying that. But when Black women consciously attack other women, and when you think about the efforts and the struggles that, let's face it, women and Black women have endured to be where they are in terms of making strides in industry and corporations and businesses, for another sister then to attack another sister because of jealousy or insecurity or unresolved issues, I find that just particularly egregious because when I look around, my expectation is not for my worst enemy to be a person who looks like me and sounds like me. Again, doesn't mean that just because we're both African American or similar in age or any other demographic that we have to be BFFs. But at a minimum, could we not be civil and cordial and perhaps talk out our differences or come to a way that we can, in fact, work together? So here's my call to action. Here's what I'd like for you to do. Two things that help victims in terms of their response to bullying. There are two factors that help them. One is the manager's response when the manager is made aware of the bullying activity. And the other is having friends or coworkers and their response. So if you are a coworker or on a team and you see bullying, my call to action for you is that if you see something, say something, because your support could make all the difference for that person who is the target. And if you are a manager and someone reports to you that there is bullying going on, that you address it formally, informally, whatever that looks like, but that you not remain silent. Because according to one researcher, Attell, Attell, that research says that 44% of the people who reported being bullied at work, the manager did nothing. Let that sink in. 44%. 4 out of 10. Almost half. The managers turned a blind eye. So in wrapping up the pink elephant in the room, that no, just because you're a woman, it doesn't mean that you are obligated to necessarily have to always have unicorns and rainbows. But what we do want to say is that for all women, no matter their color, their age, their ethnicity, it's been a struggle and we've had to fight to get where we are. So instead of fighting each other out of jealousy or envy or misunderstanding, what if we partner and collaborate so that as one gets ahead, we all get ahead? So thank you so very much for your attention. And hopefully you have picked up a tip or two to help you better address the pink elephant in the room. Thanks so much.